what we're trying to achieve in ballet, I mean, if you distill what it's about, we are presenting to an audience their idealized selves. We are not presenting every man. We're presenting the audience as they might imagine themselves to be.
This is Faith Complex, a dialogue about the entanglement of religion, politics, and art.
Hello, my name is Jacques Berlinblau of Georgetown University, and you're watching Faith Complex. Joining us today is Mr. Septime Webre, Artistic Director of the Washington Ballet, right here in the nation's capital. Mr. Webre, welcome to Faith Complex.
Great to be here.
So we met after you read a piece, which I wrote in the Chronicle of Higher Education, about some of the taunting my son was receiving for taking ballet classes. I've come to learn this is more widespread than I ever imagined. What types of remarks or mocking might you have encountered as a young man studying ballet?
Well, I think there's a perception that ballet is a girl thing, not a boy thing. So I think that that's the central thing that I experienced, and I think your son has probably experienced.
So what types of things would be said to you when you were an 8-year-old, 12-year-old kid? What did you hear?
Ballet, that's for girls.
That's for girls.
Ballet, that's for girls. That's a sissy thing. Later, in your later teens, as people started to become more aware of sexual orientation, then it became there would be gay taunts. Right. But initially, I think it was a playing with dolls versus playing football. It was more in the playing with dolls camp. It was just perceived to be a girl thing.
The perception that ballet is somehow gay, with all the negativity and imbecility that implies, where do you think it comes from?
I don't know. I'm sort of flummoxed by the idea. Outside the United States, ballet companies all around the world and countries all around the world, ballet dancers are celebrated. In Cuba, in Russia, the rock stars. And here in the United States, I think because a combination of things, ballet started as a female form in the United States. Most of our teachers are women. I think the idea of ballet as Swan Lake, 19th century work where the woman was a central role and the man supported the woman. These ideas, which are still present in 19th century repertoire, but absolutely antiquated in contemporary ballet.
Let's turn to a very difficult subject to discuss, and I'll explain why in a moment. Many ballet dancers are, in fact, gay. Correct? Is that correct?
Well, so is the population.
Right,
So
absolutely,
sure,
absolutely.
Sure.
That's not a negative. That's what's
Sure.
key about this. Does this lead to the perception that the field is overrun with gay men? Because then it's a different set of issues that ballet has to address. It has to address homophobia, not any difficulties within ballet itself.
The decision of an American man in his teens to become a professional ballet dancer is a kind of counterculture decision. So the people who would actively decide to do that have to fulfill at least a couple of criteria. They have to be good at ballet and have received great training, because that's the only way they're going to succeed. And they have to be willing to reject the plans that maybe their parents or society have made for them. And a lot of gay kids already have to do a certain amount of rejecting of society. So it makes it maybe easier for them to make that decision. But the professional ballet field is not particularly gayer than some other fields that we think of as having a lot of gay people.
Give me an example.
Advertising.
Okay.
My current company and studio company has 30 dancers. Of those 30, 3 are out gay. And many of the great choreographers of the last 50 years have been out openly gay men, and we lost a generation of them during the AIDS crisis in the 80s particularly. Men like Robert Joffrey and Alvin Ailey and Rudolf Nureyev. I think that period was the first time that the ballet world was talking about the contribution of gay men, because it was so obvious that we were losing them. And it was they that we were losing, not the general population at large.
All right, so how are you fighting this battle? The Washington Ballet is just superlative in reaching out to younger dancers and training the next generation. In fact, that's part of your mission as the director. How are you battling these two problems? On the one hand, this just imbecilic homophobia, and on the other, just a general cultural thing that dudes don't do ballet. So what's the strategy? I
actually think the Washington Ballet operates in the post-gay era. And we don't think about it, we don't talk about it, because it's not really necessary to talk about or think about. We're just creating great art. Honestly, that's our mission. And we do have to deal with a perception that ballet is for girls, which is a wholly different topic.
That's a sexism problem, not a homophobia
And I think
problem.
it's a much greater issue than the homophobia in ballet and among audiences, in all honesty. And we have a school of about 900 students, of whom about 40 are boys. But they are damn committed boys. And we have classes that are specifically for them, and a lot of mentorship for them, and we have a lot of performance opportunities for them. It's a special project. Let's put it that way. It's a special project. So on the one hand, we're reaching out to kids. We have programs throughout the District of Columbia, reaching out to second and third graders in many schools in the district. And honestly, it's a boy-dominated program.
Here's another, I don't know if this is a misconception. Actually, I think this is accurate. Ballet is very severe. These kids, that when I see them, they look exhausted after these practices. And there is this kind of high culture European severity to the thing. It's almost Prussian in its intensity. Are we correct culturally in assuming ballet is a ballet studio is a severe place?
Well, it's an intense place, and our professional dancers are dancing from 9:30 to 6 p.m. 5 days a week. I mean, that's training like the Washington Nationals or you know, the Redskins
baseball,
or whatnot.
Forget baseball. Let's go to hockey or something. That's
there
very
you
different.
go.
Yeah.
There you go. And also, what we're trying to achieve in ballet, I mean, if you distill what it's about, we are presenting to an audience their idealized selves. We are not presenting every man. We're presenting the audience as they might imagine themselves to be. We are Apollonian in that respect. And so that requires a kind of a heightened view of humanity. We are the heightened view. We are your best self. I am your best self, Jacques.
You certainly are my best self.
But without the orange socks.
Well, you know, I mean, you can't have everything.
There you go.
Septime. Here's another question. In terms of sports, all right, if we're speaking of ballet as having a sports dimension, is there any sport you watch and the movements sort of remind you of ballet? Like, oh, that athlete could be a ballet dancer.
Actually, I'm a hockey fan, and I have gone to, some friends have invited me a number of times to see the Capitals, and actually seeing the combination of this ultimately so graceful movement on the ice, and then Ovechkin's preposterously violent slamming against the plexiglass and blood-ridden ride down the wall.
Does that happen at the Washington Ballet?
I won't say.
You won't say, right. What about skating backwards? To me, that's the most ballet-esque of them.
It's kind of like the moonwalk.
Yeah. So the Washington Ballet is going to be putting on a production of The Great Gatsby. You are the choreographer. There's an awful lot of masculinity, at least in Fitzgerald's original, or thinking about masculinity, thinking about men, speaking about men. How did you choreograph this in terms of men?
Well, the 1920s in America is a time when a man could succeed and reinvent. Social mobility was actually an option, and Gatsby's the primary example of that in 20th century literature in my mind. There's a theme of class running throughout Gatsby, and there's so much implicit anger. At least when I read the book, I can imagine what anger is beneath it, although he can't quite express it until he actually takes the ultimate expression of Murder in Gatsby. So there's a whole other kind of physicality that the men, and I develop a group of 7 men who accompany George, who kind of live in the wasteland, and they do a very, very big men's dance.
We've been speaking to Mr. Septime Webre, who is the artistic director of the Washington Ballet. I want to thank you so much for coming to Faith Complex today.
It's a pleasure.
And thank you so much for your efforts on behalf of young men who want to join dance.
Thanks.